Hi everybody, I'm Chef Nick, and today on Nick Ruins Ethnic Food, we're headed to Eastern Europe, where I'm going to play around with Piroshki. And we're going to do it both baked and fried, see which we prefer. To start our Piroshki, we need to start with the dough. If we're going to make little bread-wrapped meat pies, well, got to make the bread. I do everything, or I try to do everything, when baking in metric, just because if I have to multiply or shrink a recipe, moving decimal places is a little bit easier than dealing with the imperial system. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with 125 grams of warm milk. 15-20 seconds in the microwave ain't going to hurt anything. To that we're going to add 7 to 8 grams of dry active yeast and 40 grams of sugar. Well, almost 40 grams of sugar. And what we're going to do there, give this a good mix. Take the top back off. We're going to let that bloom up for about 10 minutes. While we are blooming, we are going to add our dry ingredients. We have 200 grams of high gluten bread flour and 90 grams of rye flour. All right. And then just a little bit, we got 4 grams of kosher salt. All right, and then because this Piroshki dough is going to be a lot like an Eastern European brioche, I've got 35 grams of whole butter coming up to room temperature and 1 egg lightly beaten also coming up to room temperature. We should be there by the time the dough is ready for it. Let's get to work on our dough. All right, so you'll see here, it's foamed up, everything is nice and dissolved. We're going to add that right to our dry goods, as well as this lightly beaten egg. Kick on the KitchenAid, and we're going to let that mix for about 3 to 5 minutes. All right. It's been kneading for about 3 minutes at this point. Let's go ahead and check on it. All right. So you see we have a relatively dense dough here. Everything is relatively smooth, not terribly sticky. Now we're going to work in the butter. I always like doing this part by hand, so we'll show you that in just a second here. Now I've turned my dough onto the cutting board here. Like I said, nice and soft, a little pliable, not terribly sticky. And what we're going to do is we're going to work this butter in a little bit at a time. I don't want to be adding any extra flour to this because I want the dough to be smooth and stretchy, but I want to incorporate the butter a little bit at a time. So I'll just knead that in as we go. And not everything has to be perfectly incorporated before you do the next patch of butter. We just want to make sure that everything is getting incorporated. And you're going to leave some on the cutting board. We're just going to work that back in. And this should give us a really nice, smooth, glossy dough when we're done. All right, that took about 3 minutes. You'll see there's no butter left on the board, really. My hands are pretty clean. They're a little greasy, but that's not a big deal. But you'll see the dough bounces back. Maybe not super quickly when I push it in, but we did 3 minutes on the board, 3 minutes in the mixer, so 6 total minutes. So you'll see it's no longer sticky. It's still nice and soft though. So because we're going to be wrapping this around meat, we want to have that gluten, so it's going to stretch without tearing. But we want it rich, which is what that egg and that butter is going to give us. And then, rye. Rye is never a bad thing in Eastern European cuisine. Dough balls reformed nice and tight, lightly oiled into a bowl. I'm going to cover this with a towel, and I'm going to rise it for about 2 hours before our next step. Chopping a leek. Not super hard, but a little intimidating if you haven't done it before. So this is the root end where all the little hairy guys are. You'll see a little bulge. We're just going to cut right through there, right through the middle of the bulge. That'll remove the root end and most of the core. That'll make things a little bit more difficult. And then on the outside, kind of find this seam where it V's out. Cut right below that. All right. These are dark green. They're bitter. I don't even put this in stock, but, you know, fine for the composter. All right. And then what we're going to do here, if you've got any slime on the outside, wipe that off or pull off any dead layers. We're just going to split it the long way. All the way down. All right. See, I did have one layer on the outside that wasn't in great shape. We're going to check, see if there's any dirt in there. This is real nice and clean. Those big green leaves will act as a funnel and collect dirt. All right. And so we'll just lay it down. Following the lines, get it into nice long strips. And there we are, diced leek. So because my wife keeps asking me how best to slice mushrooms, here's the quick little primer. You want to get your mushroom in the most stable position, whether that's, well, cleaned up and then core out. It'll sit real nice and flat. If you want to leave the cores in, or the stems in, that's perfectly fine. Just kind of find a position where it's going to be most stable on the board. Now slicing the mushroom, you want to use just the tip of the knife where you're going to have the least amount of resistance cutting through that spongy material. And then, you know, cat's paw always. Don't want to be losing any fingertips. And then it's just real nice. And the blade is always against your knuckle, so you're not going to risk cutting yourself that way. Find your stable point. And then right there. Easy breezy. We're going to do that for this whole batch. Let's dice up this apple. All right, so with apples, always, I like to put them, you know, top side down. That gives me the most sturdy base to start cutting from. And then you'll see the ridges around the flower end kind of tell you exactly where the core is. So you can just slice right down on that line and avoid the core. And then it's just a matter of lining them up. And slicing. Now that our dough is off on the side and resting, let's start making our filling. So here's our mise en place. We're going to start with 1 pound of pork. I like using Duroc for this type of situation. I like the flavor. It's got much more flavor than the Chester White, which is your commodity pork. And it's not as well marbled as Berkshire, but it's ground, so all the fat's everywhere. Then I've got 1 diced leek, 1 diced apple, 8 ounces of thinly sliced mushrooms, a half cup of Steel Cut Oats, and then 8 ounces of apple juice. And obviously, as we cook this, we will be adjusting seasoning with salt and pepper. Let's get cooking. All right, in we go with our ground pork. There's plenty of fat in there, so I don't feel the need to grease the pan. Got that on medium-high heat. We're just going to start breaking this up. All right, once we've kind of got it chopped, we are going to add our leeks right off the bat. We want to get as much flavor out of these as possible. And leeks have that great onion flavor, but they're very low on moisture, so they're not going to add a bunch of extra moisture to this dish, which is going to be great because it's going in dough. Okay, meat's fully cooked or just about fully cooked at this point. We've released a good amount of moisture. You can see that the leeks are translucent. What we're going to do here is we're now going to add our 8 ounces of sliced mushrooms. When I cook these down, we're going to want to squeeze as much moisture out of these guys as possible, which is why I've held off. Now I'm going to use the salt, good sized pinch, and that's going to help me sweat those mushrooms down. A little bit of black pepper, just for measure. We'll check back in a couple of minutes. Okay, it's been about 7 minutes or so. Our mushrooms are well cooked. Mixing right into the meat. You can barely tell when one stops and the next begins. Now we're going to add our diced apple. We're just going to cook this for another 4 or 5 minutes or so. We want those apples to soften up before our final step. Sizzling away with our apples in there. Now it's going to get a little bit weird. So according to some of my research, Steel Cut Oats used to be added kind of as a filler to stretch the filling, to stretch the meat a little bit. I love the texture. I mean, when they're cooked slow, It does have a real meaty, chewy texture to it. It's also going to help act as our binder. So those oats are going to soak up any of the fat from the pork, any of the moisture from the apples and the mushrooms, and then 1 cup of apple juice. And we're just going to cook this, turn this temperature down to low. Cook this until it starts to kind of firm up and those oats start taking in the moisture. So we're going to cook this until it's nearly dry. Then we're going to transfer it to a shallow pan, and we'll throw this in the fridge for it to stiffen up. Been cooking with the oats and the apple juice in for about 10 minutes. And you'll see, when we scrape it, we're basically dry. That means we are incorporated. Let's turn this off. Take a little taste just to see where we're at. All right, could use just a pinch more salt and a little more black pepper. Stir that in real quick. And then into our pan to cool. And into the fridge we go. Moving right along, our Piroshki filling has been in the fridge for about an hour. It's a little bit below room temperature. And what we are going to do is we are going to make our pucks, or our filling. We're going to wrap the dough around that. So what we're going to do is we're going to weigh it out to about 50 grams. So give or take a little bit. All right. I'm just going to form a uniform little disc out of it. Doesn't have to be super duper pretty. It's going to be wrapped in dough. And we're just going to set that off to the side, and then we'll freeze it, or we'll throw it in the freezer until it's time to wrap the dough around it. It'll give us a little bit more structure. Now, if you're making a bunch of different types of piroshki or different flavors, one of the things that's helpful to do is to make different shapes. So I'm only making one flavor today, so round is good. If I were making a different flavor, I might do a triangle, or I might do a rod, or something just a slightly different shape, so I can tell without cracking it open what's in there. All right, I want to get these processed. I'm going to get these trayed up and in the freezer, and then we'll come back when it's time to start portioning up our dough. All right, all portioned up, formed into little pucks. I got 16 out of this batch. Let's hope we get the exact right amount of dough out of the dough recipe. These are headed for the freezer. We'll see you in a minute. Our dough has been going through its bulk ferment for about 2 hours now. Let's go ahead and check on it. All right, at least doubled in size. Filling up this bowl real nice. Well, yeah, nice and fluffy. So I'm going to turn that out. I'm not going to bother knocking it down because we're going to form little dough balls out of these. So we'll knock a decent amount of air out of them. So we don't need to punch it down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to portion these into 30-gram little balls. I find that about 60% dough to filling ratio is kind of a good spot for me to be with my piroshkis. So I'm going to roll these out. We're going to weigh them, we're going to roll them, and then we'll let that rest for about 15 minutes or so, let that gluten kind of reestablish itself and relax, and then we'll start stuffing. Ooh, that's way too heavy. All right. 30 grams. Form a little ball. Set it off to the side. Keep it covered so it doesn't dry out. I will get the rest of these done while you guys wait. It's time. Let's start forming our piroshkis. So I'm going to grab one of our little dough balls here. Gluten is relaxed. We're going to start flattening that out. Now, if you want to end up with a round product, start with a round product. You'll notice as I work it, I'm just kind of working my way around the outside. I'm going to leave the middle a little bit thicker than the edges. You'll see why in just a second here. But as I work on this, I kind of want to get it out. There we go. so that it's about twice the size of our little pucks that have just come out of the freezer. That's the nice thing. It's a nice oily dough. It's very soft. So if you tear a hole, just pinch it shut. You're good to go. All right, a little bit bigger. There we go. All right, dough is stretched out to a little bit bigger than 1.5 to 2 times the size of our puck. Take that in right in the middle. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go around, get everything pinched in together in the middle. All right. This is why you want it a little thicker in the middle, because you're going to get this buildup of dough on the bottom as we close up all these seams. There we go. So, we've got to make those seams go away. There we go. Reestablish our round shape. And yeah, smaller than a hockey puck, but certainly round and beautiful. We're going to set that off to the side on a lined baking sheet. When they're all filled up, we're going to throw a towel over that, and it's going to proof again for another 1.5 hours, which is why I wasn't worried about freezing the pucks, because they're going to thaw out. And now it's time for our Piroshki cook-off. So I'm heating my oil up here on the stove. We're going to be looking for 350 degrees Fahrenheit. This tray here on the lined baking tray, I am going to hit those with an egg wash. We got eggs and heavy cream in here. That should give us a really nice golden brown crust. I want to get just a little dab on top. Don't want too much on there. So these will bake for about 20 minutes, give or take, in a 335 degree oven. I'm not exactly sure how long the fried ones are going to take. I'm assuming 5 or 6 minutes, so we're at about 250 degrees on the oil. I'm going to throw these guys in the oven, and then once the oil is at temp, the fried ones go in. They should be coming out about the same time, and then you can watch me eat not 1, but 2 piroshki. Okay, it's time. Let's try one of these. He's nice and puffy. Just going to slide that on into the fryer. We're at 350 degrees. Just gotta hope that our seams stay. Whoop. All right. Let's check on these in a few minutes. Okay, it's been about 2 minutes. Well, it looks like this seam didn't hold. I'm gonna do better on the next one. All right. These held up okay. So this took, that seam is absolutely maybe. All right, so I either need to work on my seams or need to tweak my recipe for frying. They're looking great, honestly. I mean, shiny, beautiful color on them. Let's check the temperature. About 110. So I guess I probably should have started them at about 325 degrees so that they, they got fully cooked. Thankfully, everything on the inside is fully cooked. We're just reheating it at this point. So, well, there's 1 point for baking. Timer just went off. Let's pull our piroshki out of the oven. Ooh-wee! Golden brown and delicious. All right. Those are pretty. Seams look good because they were not floating. They were pressing down on the seams. Internal temp. 190. All right. All right, these are going to be nice and hot. I'm going to give these a minute to cool before I put them in my face hole, and then we will do our side-by-side test. Here we are at the end. I have got my best looking fried piroshki. Good seam on the bottom, stay nice and tight. Got some nice bubbling on the surface. I can't see. There you go. We did that light right. Get some bubbling on the surface, almost like an empanada. And then on the baked version, that sheen. I didn't brush this with oil. This is just from the egg wash. Seam stayed closed because had that weight pushing down on it. So let's go ahead and taste them side by side. We'll do the fry guy first because, as we said, that one didn't get as warm in the center. It was only about 110 degrees or so. Should have some carryover cooking, but let's give it a shot. Okay. It's warm enough. Look at that meat texture on the inside. The mushrooms, the meat, the apples. That residual sweetness. It's still savory, but it's almost donut-like. All right, let's try our baked guys. I like the looks on these quite a bit better. Let's try the bite. It's hot to the point where it's almost, the heat is almost kind of overwhelming some of the flavors. I'm sure this got to cool down a little bit. You'd be able to taste all the components. But I really love how the oats like soaked up all the extra flavors, and I can't tell that there's oats in here. They're just like another texture that's really meaty, really fulfilling. This is super savory. You can see here, I think we got a little bit better puff on the dough going in the fryer. Just, I think it had a chance to pop before it set, whereas this one, it was kind of a slow creep up. So here are your piroshki. Here's your piroshki. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.